Well, before we press play on the movie, Will, and before you barrage me with your incessant questions about the movie, it's important to take a little bit look at how Spider-Man came to be, how he was created and how he was birthed into the world and became this enduring figure that would lead us to the 2002 movie that lays before us today. We go back to 1962. Marvel is having real success with its brand new formula of superheroes, the Fantastic Four and the Incredible Hulk, the first comics of that Marvel age. And this is the time that people in power are noticing a huge surge in the buying power of teenagers. I mean, teenagers have become a growing cultural... They've sort of become their own cultural group since the Second World War ended, and it's taken a little while to get going. But by the time you get to the early 60s, there is a vibrant kind of culture of young people, not children anymore, not adults yet, and a very tempestuous kind of period of their lives. And they are, through them, we are beginning to see the emergence, in Western society at least, of counterculture for the first time. Culture, entertainment, art that is not dependent on established norms that generally come from older people and generations. And that's who's really vibing with these new comics that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby have created, teenagers. So Stan Lee, being the Shakespeare of the 60s, decides to take it upon himself that the next character he's going to write and create is going to be a teenage superhero. This was a completely new idea. Completely new. And children had been sidekicks in the older comic books. Batman and Robin, he's the sidekick. Captain America and Bucky. But they always had adult supervision. They were there for the adult to explain the plot to, speak down to a little bit. They were there to always get kidnapped by the villain and held hostage so the adult could come in and save them. They weren't heroes in their own right. Stan Lee in the 60s, whether he fully knew it or not, with Spider-Man, with this character, decided to give teenagers what they desperately craved in this period of time. Independence and agency. That had not happened ever before in comic books, and you'll struggle to find too many examples at this time, in the literary world. Stan says subsequently that the idea, he got kind of the insect idea for Spider-Man from an old Pulp Fiction character called the Spider, who was a bit like the Shadow, pulp novels of a detective with a gun and a kind of a bit of a quirk, maybe a little power, but not really. They were kind of early forerunners of superheroes, the Shadow and those kind of characters. They didn't appear in full colour in a comic book, but you could get these pulp novels, very cheaply produced pulp novels, a lot like the westerns and the romance ones at the time as well.
Yeah.
So Stan says he got the insect idea from the Spider character and from watching an insect, a spider on a wall. This is hotly disputed by Jack Kirby, his long-time writing and collaborating partner, artistic partner. Kirby claims that Spider-Man is ripped off from a concept that he and Joe Simon came up with. Joe Simon and Jack Kirby created Captain America in the 40s, and they're veterans at the time that Stan Lee is creating the Marvel Universe. Kirby says that the Spider-Man character is ripped off from a character they created about a little boy who finds a magic ring and it gives him insect powers. Now, I don't know. That character was already being published by Archie Comics, the people that make Sabrina the Teenage Witch and, of course, Archie as well. And that character was called The Fly. I don't think Kirby is kind of really claiming that he created Spider-Man, and I think what they're really saying is that that's where the insect perspective, the insect idea came from. For me, there might be a dispute over where that idea came from, but the Spider-Man character is wholly different and original. It's very, it's completely different.
Oh, too right.
So Stan Lee puts this idea together, and the Marvel publisher at the time, Martin Goodman, does not see any potential in this character at all. A superhero that's an ordinary teenager was very radical. He didn't like that. The hero being insect-based, he thought was going to be very disgusting and off-putting. Because he just went, well, the insects are disgusting. We don't want anything to do with them. So he only agrees to publish the Spider-Man character if it happens in the very last issue of a comic book that he's already cancelled.
What?
So a sci-fi anthology comic called Amazing Fantasy has already been cancelled. It's only got one more issue left. So he says to Stan, if you want to do this character so bad, put him in the last issue of this. And he's thinking, I'll never have to hear about this again.
Yeah.
You'll fill the last issue, because Amazing Fantasy is an anthology, so it doesn't have recurring characters. You have one story, and that's the end, and it never happens again. So that's the deal that Stan Lee is given. You can create the character once. So Stan has Jack Kirby take a stab at designing Spider-Man. But Stan has said in subsequent interviews that he really hated the artwork that Kirby came back with. Kirby was drawing a powerful, heroic figure. And Stan Lee said he knew this was all wrong for the character. So he turned to... can you imagine now, Will, a heroic, tall, muscled Spider-Man character? If it looked like Superman or something.
Only in my dreams.
It's completely, it would... There's no way it would have worked.
No.
So Stan Lee turns to an artist called Steve Ditko, who's worked on scores of sci-fi comics for Atlas Comics, which is what Marvel were kind of called in the 1950s. Ditko has this unmistakably weird feeling to his artwork. He is not known for drawing tall, muscled figures or handsome characters with square jaws and, matinee good looks. His drawings are of the average Joe, and that's exactly what this idea really called for. Kind of a skinny, jaunty, like weird looking character. Almost not quite a spider looking thing, but you don't want a muscled dude. So Ditko creates that really striking costume for Spider-Man, which is not like any other costume that had ever been seen in superhero comics to that point, and probably wouldn't be repeated for a long time. Amazing Fantasy 15 hits the newsstands, and the character was meant to disappear after that. That comic is cancelled already. But when Martin Goodman reviews the sales figures a few months later, he sees that putting Spider-Man on the front cover of Amazing Fantasy turned a failing comic book series into one of their highest selling titles. So he immediately knows, whoa, okay, I was wrong, Stan was right, we got to do something here. So an ongoing Spider-Man comic book is ordered, with Stan Lee and Steve Ditko at the helm. And Spidey very quickly becomes a cultural icon in America. It's published in 1963, the first of the regular series, 1963. And by 1965, Esquire magazine conduct a nationwide survey of college campuses all over America. And they find in that survey that college students rank Spider-Man alongside Bob Dylan and Che Guevara as top revolutionary figures in culture.
Wow.
After 2 years. One of the students in the survey wrote... They all wrote their feelings, and one of the students says that Spider-Man, he is beset by woes, money problems, and the question of his existence. In short, he is one of us.
Yeah.
And goddamn if that doesn't nail the character and nail why that character connects with so many people across so many generations. And off the back of that, Spider-Man has endured for over 50 years and has sold over 385 million copies across the world. So that's how the character came to be, and that's what the whirlwind was set off by Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, and sort of Martin Goodman. Once he starting to realise at that stage that, you know what, when Stan Lee puts pen to paper, I need to kind of go with his gut feeling on this. I need to listen to what this guy creates. That was a time when Stan Lee still needed to go to Martin Goodman to get permission to create things and characters and write books, and that wouldn't last forever, because after a while the people at Marvel go, maybe Stan knows what he's doing.